Pardon me? Oh, yeah.
James McCarthy, NNSL. Okay. Alrighty, good evening and thank you for joining us for an update on the wildfire situation in the Northwest Territories. My name is Agata Gutkowska and I currently work with the Territories Emergency Management Organization and I will be your moderator for today. If you are not on our panel, I kindly ask that you keep your cameras off and your mics muted until it is your turn to speak. Media, please do not turn your cameras on. And like yesterday, I am going to paste a little cheat sheet of commonly used acronyms here in government so that if you have any questions or are confused by what some of our speakers are saying, you can refer to that. All right, so today we have a number of elected officials on the call and our opening remarks portion will be a little bit longer than usual. So that said, if I need to extend the media QA portion by 15 minutes, I will do that to allow for you guys to get your questions answered. So today we will start with remarks from Shane Thompson, Minister of Environment and Climate Change and Municipal and Community Affairs. Then we will hear from Caroline Wozniak, Minister of Finance as well as Industry, Tourism and Investment. I will then ask N.W.T Chief Edward Sangris for the Yellowknife's Dene First Nation to make remarks. Then Yellowknife Mayor Rebecca Alty will speak, followed by Deputy Mayor of Fort Smith, Jay McDonald, and then Candice Jameson, the Mayor of Hay River. And Premier Cochrane will be making closing remarks today. So after the opening remarks, we will move straight to the media QA portion. And just like we've been doing, I will give priority to Northern media. So we'll go through Northern N.W.T media first. You guys will get one question and one follow-up. And once we're done with that, I will move to Southern media. And I will ask you guys to raise your hands if you have a question. So because we have a really large panel, I'm just going to paste the names and titles into the chat. Actually, you know what? I'll just go over them so you guys also get pronunciation. All right, so on the call, on the panel, we will have Premier Carolyn Cochrane, Minister Shane Thompson, Minister Caroline Wozniak, N.W.T Chief Edward Sangris, Yellowknife Mayor Rebecca Alty, Yellowknife City Manager Sheila Bassi-Kellett, Hay River Mayor Candice Jameson, Fort Smith Deputy Mayor Jay McDonald. We have Jennifer Young with Emergency Management Organization. She's the information officer. We have Mike Westwick. He's a wildfire information officer for the Department of Environment and Climate Change. We have Martin Goldney, Secretary to Cabinet for Executive and Indigenous Affairs. We have John McDonald, Deputy Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. We have Claudia Kraft, Territorial Medical Director. Mandy Bolstad, Assistant Deputy Minister, Department of Justice. We have Corporal Matt Halstead, RCMP. We have Jeffrey Edison, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister for the Department of Infrastructure. We have Corey Strang, CEO and President of NTPC, and we have Imran Khan, CFO of Northwest Health. And again, I pasted that list of people and their titles into the chat here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Minister Thompson for opening remarks.
Thank you. For people that I might be cutting in and out, our internet in Fort Simpson has been acting up here lately. So good evening, everyone. I will keep my remarks brief because I think it's important that we continue to hear from the people who are working so hard on the ground to keep our communities safe and support evacuees during this difficult time. It was another challenging day for firefighters with increased fire behavior in the North Slave and South Slave regions. Crews continue to work hard to prevent these wildfires from reaching our communities. While we cannot control the weather, we can influence fire behavior by cutting away fuels and strengthening defenses around our communities. And that's exactly what crews are working so hard to do. As evacuation periods drag on, we know that affected residents will wonder how they will be taken care of. This is completely fair, and I promise you that discussions are ongoing about how our government can enhance support. You are the center of every decision we make. When communities are evacuated, our first priority is to ensure that residents get out safe. Now that evacuees are safely located Elsewhere, we shift our focus to how we will continue to prioritize your health and well-being going forward. I promise we will continue to have these conversations so that we can support you during this difficult time. The government of Northwest Territories is here to help you. At this time, I'd like to turn to my colleague, Finance Minister Caroline Wozniak, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister Thompson. Good evening, everyone. So folks, look, the N.W.T is going to be as responsive as we need to be to a situation that is clearly evolving and has evolved since last week. We simply can't design programs or policies or guidelines to respond to a situation that we've never faced before in the abstract. But we're in that situation now, and we're now in a position to start to do that hard work, and people are actively doing that work. We need to ensure that publicly funded supports are designed to be fair, to be reasonable, and to be responsive. Emergency evacuation centers set up during the process for those who needed an immediate place to stay were there, as were flights organized, as was gas available at Steen River. So I want people to keep that in mind in considering if that's what we were able to set up at the beginning, we're conscious of what will be needed at the other end as well. We got folks out, we will get them home, whether by air or by ground, and we certainly won't leave anyone behind. So, there was messaging at the beginning about, if you can make your own arrangements, please do. Obviously, accommodations made with family or with friends, that is certainly a no-cost solution. Please make that consideration. If you have home insurance, obviously, please contact your broker, see if you have the ability for adequate sheltering services. But if anybody needs shelter or food, please go to an evacuation registration center. I acknowledge certainly some folks would have incurred some costs early on without knowing about the evacuation center process. We are aware of that. The N.W.T, though, now with our partners in Alberta, will make sure that everyone that needs a place to stay will have one, and that everyone that needs food will have food. And we're going to make sure that all of that continues no matter how long the evacuation orders last. We've also started rolling out the Evacuee Income Disruption Program that provides $750 to residents with some form of income disruption. There's also movements happening with income support for emergency response funding. And I just want to note on the Evacuee Disruption Program, that was developed during the first Hay River evacuation. It was developed in response to need. So I hope people do take some comfort. The N.W.T was responsive earlier this spring, and we will continue this type of approach. I want to give a shout out to communities across Alberta and now Manitoba as well. They are offering a number of free amenities, public transportation and recreation facilities. And another shout out here to the United Way. They have played a critical role throughout the summer season of wildfires, filling gaps in the nonprofit sector and supporting very individualized needs that often simply can't be addressed from a broader focused government program. Work's also underway at ITI. We have begun connecting in with the business community to determine their needs, but also to determine their capacity and how they can fit into this effort. We did this once during COVID, and we can certainly do it again. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Minister Wozniak. Now I'd like to introduce DETA Chief Edward Sangris for Yellowknife's Dene First Nation.
Good evening, and thank you to all the leaders that are here. Today, as we gathered in spirit, and our hearts are weighed down by the burdens of the distance and separation. As chiefs of DETA and the leader of Yellowknife Dene First Nations, and representative of our people's resilience and unyielding spirit. Though we are physically scattered by the flames that rage through our beloved homeland, know that our heart bonds remain unbroken, our unity unwavering, our connection to this land, to our ancestors, and to one another stronger than ever. From time immemorial, the land beneath our feet has nurtured us, provide us, and cradle us in its sacred embrace. Our history, culture, and identity are woven into the very fabric of this land. Each hill, each river, each tree, a testament to the legacy of our people. This land is not just a place where we reside. It is the living embodiment of our heritage, reflection of our enduring spirit, and promise to the future generations. Today, as the wildfire rage and force us to leave behind the familiarity of our homes, let us take solace in the knowledge that we are not alone. Our ancestors, our ancestors stand with us, whispering encourage into our hearts, guiding us through these trying times. And while we are physically apart, our community remains unbreakable. A tapestry of shared memories, shared laughter, shared hopes for a better tomorrow. In the face of this crisis, I'm filled with pride and gratitude for the unwavering dedication of our essential workers and steadfast commitment to our Yellowknife and First Nations staff, who have chosen to remain behind, standing as guardians of our land, protectors of our homes, and the beacons of hope in our darkest hours. Their sacrifice embodies the spirit of community and unselfishness that define us as people. To those of you who have been forced to evacuate, I want you to know you are not alone. Our thoughts are with you, our prayers guiding your journey to safety. Our ancestors walk beside you, offering strength in moments of doubt, comfort in moments of fear. Our community stands united, ready to rebuild and restore, to reclaim what is rightfully ours. Let us also take a moment to acknowledge the firefighters, first responders, and the volunteers who have come to our aid from far and near. Their tireless efforts, their dedication to preserving life and land serve as a reminder that humanity's bond transcends boundaries. Into this shared struggle, we find hope, knowing that we're not alone on this journey. As we face the challenges of today and tomorrow, let us show strength from the land itself, from the wisdom of our elders, and from the unbreakable tie that binds us together as community. Together we shall rise from the ashes, rebuilding not just our homes, but our lives, our heritage, and our future. In unity, in resilience, and the enduring spirit of Yellowknife and the First Nations, we shall overcome. May the fires of today become the embers of light that path a stronger, brighter tomorrow. Masicho.
Thank you very much for that, Chief Sangris. Now I would like to introduce Mayor Rebecca Alty of Yellowknife.
Good evening, everyone. Today I had the opportunity to fly over the fire breaks that the city and local contractors created in the municipal boundaries, the control lines and the fire retardant lines that the N.W.T and the military are working on just outside the municipal boundary, and the fire area itself. I'd like to thank the Department of Environment and Climate Change for the opportunity to get up and see all of the incredible work that has been done and that continues to happen. It's one thing to see the fire area and the defensive work on maps, but it's another thing to see it for real. N.W.T Fire continues to classify this fire as a threat to Yellowknife, and they're currently in the process of evaluating the amount of work it would take to bring the fire to a mop-up and patrol stage and eliminate the threat to the capital. This requires a thorough on-the-ground assessment and may take a few days to do, but once it's complete, I look forward to seeing it. It's important information for them in the fight against the fire. Of course, the question that everyone wants to know is when can we come home? There are two parts to the return plan. One is fire safety, and two is ensuring essential services are back up and operational. In regards to fire safety, ECC is continuing to work hard to fight the fire, and Fire Smart work continues within the municipality. In regards to services that will be needed when residents come back, the city and the N.W.T are actively working on what work needs to be done, when, by who, and more. We started that planning on Friday, and we'll continue working on it until we welcome residents back. Unfortunately, for now, it's not safe to return, so residents should remain where they are. And finally, I know this fire evacuation and the evacuation have caused financial hardship for residents, businesses, and the municipality, and of course the N.W.T, which of course is also residents and businesses, the municipal and territorial government. I appreciate Minister Wozniak's remarks tonight. Disaster financial assistance is definitely needed in our territory, and Council continues to urge the federal and territorial government to work together to provide assistance. Again, as each day passes, I'm sure there's a new question or concern that can pop up. If you have any questions, please call 811 if you're in the Northwest Territories, or 1-844-259-1793 if you're outside of the N.W.T, or visit the N.W.T's public safety page. Thank you and take care.
Thank you, Mayor Alty. Now we will hear from Hay River Mayor Candace Jamieson.
Thank you, Agatha. Firstly, our thoughts are with those that have lost homes and businesses within our community. Friends and neighbors in Hay River, as well as Enterprise, Catlodache, West Point First Nation, and the Hay River Métis continue to support each other. It was only a few months ago that Enterprise was helping our communities, and now they will need all of our support to rebuild. I've had the opportunity this last week to work beside crews from all over Canada, as well as our own fire chief, Travis Wright. And I have seen the dedication and time that they have been putting into keeping our community safe. We are in good hands as we face this difficult week ahead. In addition to fighting the fire, crews have created 10 kilometers of fire guard and set up fire protection on residential properties, businesses, and community buildings. Our own Hay River Department has been putting out hot spots that could flare up along highways and around community structures. Aircraft, when they can fly, have been putting out spots that are unreachable on the ground. There are over 200 crew and 50 pieces of equipment, all working hard to reduce the risk. I've heard from many of you, though, and we know that you've had your livelihoods interrupted. It is difficult to hear that you may not be able to come home for some time. Work is being done to make your return smooth and quick when it is safe to do so. We would like to thank the crews and military that have come from all over Canada to assist us. Alberta has also made our evacuees feel welcome, which is greatly appreciated. Information is available on the Hay River website and Facebook page. Please take advantage of those resources and look after each other. It reminds me of something I heard recently. The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Now I'd like to introduce Deputy Mayor Jay McDonald to make remarks.
Good evening and thank you. On behalf of the Mayor and Council of the Town of Fort Smith, I would like to start by saying that to our citizens, every effort is for you. All of our volunteers and first responders are home working tirelessly day and night to ensure that our community is protected and that all of our values are safe. I wanted to also thank the people of the I apologize. Our first priority as a mayor and council is about getting through this as a community together and ensuring that all of our people can come home to Fort Smith as soon as possible. We understand that in the days to come, there are some challenges and that the first responders are working tirelessly to ensure that everything is being done to protect our community. We are really supportive of all of the efforts, and we want to ensure that we thank all of the first responders that have been working at this, and especially to our own Fort Smith residents that are there volunteering and supporting this effort. At this time, it's not safe for our citizens to return to Fort Smith, and we really want to encourage those folks that are able to leave to please vacate the community, allow the first responders to do their job and ensure that they can focus on the fires and on the protection of the community as opposed to having to do other activities. I also wanted to mention that at this time, it's really important that we use the official sources of information to get updates on the situation within the community and on how the fire is progressing. A lot of rumors have been out there on social media, etc., and it's really challenging and can create undue stress for folks when the information is not clear or vetted or accurate at times. So I'd like to say in closing, thank you to everyone, and that please be safe, and to the citizens of Fort Smith, please be patient. We're working as hard as we can, as quickly as we can to try and get everyone home. We will be providing regular updates through social media. Fire information is available on the Town of Fort Smith Protective Services page. And we will also be circulating regular media briefings to all of the hotels and the evacuation locations. So thank you, everyone, and Fort Smith strong.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. We'll now move on to the question period, starting with N.W.T Media. And as I mentioned, you guys will get one question and one follow-up. Please direct your question, or at least try to direct your question, to the appropriate speaker. And if you don't know who that is, that's okay. I can help you out. But I did throw the names and titles of our panelists in the chat, so that might be able to help you. Alrighty, so I will start with Emily Blake at Cabin Radio. Hi, Emily.
Hi, my question's for Minister Thompson. I'm wondering if the government is planning to help with financial costs for communities that are flying in food.
I'm actually going to send this question over to Minister Wozniak.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks, Emily. So we do right now we've stood up a working group between departments to maintain all of the supply chains. This involves maintaining communications with the fly-in communities directly, as well as with the food suppliers and the logistics organizations. So, first and foremost, wanting to make sure that the supply chains are intact and strong, working with them to see what we can do to keep our costs down as much as possible, knowing that without Yellowknife as the hub, that certainly is going to require a bit more creativity. But yeah, look, then sort of the last part of that is to consider whether some sort of subsidy or other offset is going to be required to ensure that people in small communities who already faced very significant food costs aren't facing unnecessarily additional costs in the circumstances. So at this point, I don't have any answers to whether that is required, but we are in a position where we are well set up to know whether it will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Emily, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm not sure who this is for, but I'm hoping to get some clarity on whether those food flights are able to come out of Yellowknife, because I've kind of heard conflicting things.
Sure. I will throw this to Jeffrey at INF.
Yes, thank you for the question. We are working with the airport. It is open. First of all, the airport was closed to commercial flights and only open based on a NOTAM, notice to airmen, and limited flights to evacuation, medevac emergencies. We are actually open, and we're working on plans to increase the number of flights available for food and supplies to go to the communities. I can speak on the transportation part of that only, not the actual food supply chain or any of that, but the definitely the airport is open, and we are working to increase the number of flights for food and supplies to the communities. That's it.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Minister Wozniak, did you want to add to that at all from that food security perspective?
Thanks, Agatha. No, I don't think I have much to say other than, again, to sort of, people do talk that there's too many silos. I think this is one time where the way we've got ourselves set up, we're going to avoid that. And that means that, when Jeff's saying he's only able to speak to one part of it, infrastructure is on that working group. So he's speaking to one part of it. We've got other people dealing with the other parts. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Minister. All right, moving along to Sydney Cohen at CBC North.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. So the Clecho government is saying that the N.W.T didn't tell them where it was sending Clecho evacuees from Yellowknife, and now it's scrambling to track down its citizens, especially vulnerable people like people who are homeless and elders who need interpreters. And they're worried about those people and they want an explanation. So I'm not sure who can best answer this, but I'm wondering what the government's explanation is to the Clecho government right now.
Sure. Minister Thompson, can I get you to, oh, Premier, you jumped in here. Do you want to, yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I do know that the Clecho government has reached out and has concerns about their residents, but I also know that all of the Indigenous governments from the south side right to the northern to the Beaufort Delta have residents that live in the Northwest Territories and have concerns about their evacuees. So we are currently we're providing them the updates on what's happening with the fires. We are meeting with them. Minister Thompson is meeting with the ones in the evacuated communities, and we'll be calling a council of leaders meeting so that all Indigenous governments can ask the questions that they have, and we can try to provide supports, recognizing again that Yellowknife hosts many Indigenous people from all regions of the N.W.T. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Minister Thompson?
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to add on to what the Premier has said here. So I can tell you that the Grand Chief has reached out to me and Minister Green, and Minister Green and her staff are working with the Clecho government to identify the homeless, the people that have language barriers and that. So we are working with them hand in hand on this. Yeah, I think that just needs to be added. Thank you.
Thank you. Sydney, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, this one's kind of, it's a pretty different question, but obviously we all know there have been many issues with telecommunications during these fires, and that the evacuation order didn't reach people in Kikisa for this reason. We're expecting more natural disasters in the future. How will the government ensure that people in every community get informed of evacuation orders and other important information next time telecommunications go down in a disaster?
Sure, I might need help with this one, panel. Minister Thompson, do you want to, or Minister Wozniak?
Yeah, thanks, Agatha. Look, I'll take a run at it, and then Minister Thompson may want to add from the emergency perspective. But Department of Finance is a liaison with our telecommunications industry, and really at that point we are a liaison. But it is the private sector that does provide predominantly a lot of our telecommunications, internet, and otherwise. What I can say again, and this is probably a bit beyond the weeds of where we are tonight, Northwest Tel is mandated under CRTC to ensure that communities are up to speed in terms of their internet availability. I realize that's different from cell service and cell availability, but some method and means of communication into those communities through, with a high-speed download situation so that they're up to par, that will certainly improve those communications. And for communities that don't have a fiber, it's going to mean satellite. One of our next challenges is to make sure we have redundancy. That's what brought us down last Sunday. We didn't have the redundancy. It's something that we continue to push for so that we can find the funding to get there. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Thompson, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about the Kikisa situation specifically. So, when the evacuation order came in, I did have MP McLeod reach out to me and ask if residents could stay at Dory Point. We reached out to them and said yes, they could be doing that. We also had communications through the mayor of Fort Providence, and so the communication was getting to the community, I guess through snail mail, which, verbally through people that way there. I know that our superintendent has actually talked to the band manager today, and they're having communications there. So we did explain the situation to the community. There may have been some clarification. Was it an alert or an order? And it was very much an order. I did provide that information to the MLA as well. But we could improve our communications. And like Minister Wozniak said, one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. All right, moving along now to Sarah Connors at APTN. Hi, Sarah.
Hey there. My question is for the finance minister. I've been speaking with some evacuees who evacuated by car, and were pretty surprised and frustrated to find out yesterday that they're not going to be reimbursed for their travel expenses. I'm just wondering, what is your response to their concerns?
Minister Wozniak?
Thanks. Look, I'm actually really glad to have that question. I think I looked back as best I could as to what was sort of asked yesterday. And the reality is that right now, with over 65% of the people of the Northwest Territories not in the Northwest Territories, the programs that we have set up for natural disaster evacuations, of which we've sadly had too many in the last couple of years, they are not designed to deal with the kind of situation that we're in. They're not tuned to the kind of situation that we're in. And so, asking that number of residents to have to quickly and en masse depart the territory, figuring out how we're going to be able to, and how we need to support that fairly and responsibly, that is a challenge. And that's a challenge we are right now facing and addressing. But that's where, I think the point that was probably trying to be made yesterday is that we don't right now have that program, and I don't have that answer. But I'm glad to be able to address it tonight, because we're certainly aware of it. I mean, we hear it too. We're MLAs first, as well as being ministers, and our MLA colleagues are certainly putting it to us that we're going to have to figure this out. People won't be able to get back if they don't have some funding in many cases. So, the policies and guidelines are under consideration. Options are going to come to the Financial Management Board, and then we'll be able to move forward from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Sarah, do you have a follow-up?
Oh.
Oh, sorry, Minister Thompson, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to what Minister Wozniak said. And she said it, I think, in her opening comments. In the previous fire the season, like when Kadichi and Hay River had to evacuate first, we didn't have the 750. So it was a process that was developed by cabinet. We worked on it. The staff are, working on it. But as Minister Wozniak said, here is a different situation. 68% of our population has been evacuated. So we now have to look at this as well. So I know we don't, with Department of MAC, it doesn't have it, but even with the 750, wasn't a MACA thing. That was a finance thing and a government approach to it. So people have to be aware that it is very a live issue, and we as cabinet are having those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Thompson. Sarah, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, and I'm not sure who this would be for, but I was just looking at the August 16th evacuation order, and it states only residents who did not have the option to leave by road were asked to register for a flight. So at that time, at least as I understand it, there was an initial push for people to self-evacuate by car. I'm just wondering if someone could clarify or give more detail, why those folks who, as I understand it, feel like they were following an evacuation order, again, won't be entitled to reimbursement or compensation.
Sure. I'm going to throw this one to Minister Thompson first. Minister Thompson?
Yeah, so I think Jennifer Young could explain the order better, and then
Okay.
maybe then turn to Minister Wozniak afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer?
Hi, thank you. The order was written in a sense to give options to the population, given we had to evacuate thousands of people at one time. It was really meant to look at different ways we could do that, given we could only access so many assets in a short time frame. Sorry. You know, it's important to recall that within 48 hours, we evacuated tens of thousands of people out of Yellowknife. And I think that's, you know, important to remember that we did that because we had a variety of ways for people to leave the north.
Thank you. Minister Wozniak, do you want to jump in?
Thanks, Agatha. And yeah, and so this does follow nicely, because the reality is the order is written to get folks out of the territory safely and quickly. As far as what that's going to look like on the back end and how we're now going to find a way for someone who does that, some sort of compensation is available for costs that may have been incurred. You know, again, when they were being asked to evacuate, gas was being provided free of charge at the Steen River. You know, now we're going to have to look at, is that going to be adequate to get people back up here, and is that fair for those people who had to make that initial evacuation? Is it reasonable? Is it what's required? Is it sufficiently responsive to the situation that we found ourselves in, which is unlike any situation the N.W.T or the N.W.T has ever found itself in? So, you know, that was not even a week ago at this point. I can tell you that the Department of Finance is already working on what different options might look like that could, you know, balance out the fact that we know people made those choices in a difficult circumstance and they've incurred some costs and some needs. Some may be able to use their insurance, some don't have insurance. Against the fact that we also want to be mindful that our evacuation costs, we would, you know, ideally like to fit them within the federal disaster assistance program. The fire costs, the fire suppression costs are astronomical. So we have to figure all this out within our capacity and our means. But, you know, the messaging here is no one is saying no. We're saying, let us do some policy work so we can figure out what a good option is. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. All right, Ian Down at CKLB. Hi, Ian. Ian, you're muted.
Yes, sorry. My first question is for Mike Westwick. Can we get an update on the situation near N.W.T? Like, how close is the fire? What are the conditions like?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, we got a good handle on that fire. The fire didn't advance any closer than it had. Temperatures cooled down there, and the team's got a good handle on N.W.T there. The evacuation advisory put in place by the town was lifted, and we're feeling pretty good about it. We're doing some mop up. We're continuing to manage the fire, but we're in a good place.
Thank you. Ian, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, this question I believe is for Mayor Candace Jamieson. So I saw in one of the updates that preliminary planning has begun for eventual return to Hay River. I'm just interested in learning more about what that preliminary planning is.
Mayor Candace Jamieson, go ahead. Sorry, Mayor, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Ian, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, so my understanding, based on a recent update, is that preliminary planning has begun for eventual return to Hay River. I'm just curious what that preliminary planning consists of.
When it is safe to do so, we're in early stages, but because we're still looking at a fire that's coming at us and making, you know, what our evacuation plans, that kind of deal. But, you know, we've been through this in May. We know that we work very closely with ECC to determine when it would be safe to do so. So we just want to have everything in place. And again, it's going to be essential services. It's going to be our hospital up and running. And thank goodness we have communications back with our residents. So those are the big ones.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mike Westwick, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it's very much an active fire situation there. The fire is about 8 kilometers away from from town in Hay River there. It is not safe, and it likely will not, given the conditions that we're expecting to see there, it likely will not be safe for some time here. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And of course, Mayor Jameson and her team on the ground are a big part of that work there. So just wanted to hit that home from a fire threat perspective.
Thank you, Mike. All right, moving along to Nellie at Lucky Lawn. Hi, Nellie.
Hello, do you hear me well?
Yep.
I have a question maybe for Jennifer Young. I would like to know, as today, how many people were evacuated by plane and if more flights are scheduled for evacuation of more people this week.
Sure. Jennifer?
Yes, thank you for the question. I don't have the number, sorry, on the top of my head about in terms of how many were evacuated today, but we know that some more members did go to Winnipeg. I think it was around a smaller number, like I want to say less than 20, but please don't quote me on that. I don't have it on hand, but I know we did put some more into Winnipeg.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Nellie?
Yes, I would like to know for the elder people, the vulnerable people who decided not to leave for some reason and are still in Yellowknife, if there is a plan to check if these people are doing well, if they have all they need to, if they have everything they need, and if there is a plan by the government of the city.
Sure. Jennifer, can you speak to this one as well, please?
Was the question around if we're doing wellness checks for people that are currently still residing in Yellowknife? Is that the question?
Yes, for the elder people who decided not to evacuate because they are elder people and for some reason they want to stay.
So everyone has their choice to stay or not to leave, but we aren't currently doing wellness checks through the emergency management organization on those that are staying. But I know that the RCMP is actively doing some patrolling around in the community to check on residents through that operation. So if RCMP is on the line, maybe they would like to add a little bit further.
Yeah, Colonel Matt Halstead, can you add to this, please? And talk a little bit about these wellness checks that RCMP is doing?
Yeah, so we've been taking a lot of calls for well-being checks for residents that they believe that people are phoning from down south and they believe that they might still be in the community. When we get those calls, we're responding to them and trying to locate and determine whether those folks are still here in Yellowknife. If they are, we're informing them of the risks to being here and encouraging them to leave. They are subject to the evacuation order, but yeah, we are checking in when we receive calls.
Thank you, Matt. All right, now moving along to Ethan at My True North Now. Ethan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Quick question. Is Julie Green in this call?
No, she is not. We do have a representative from NTHSSA.
Okay, that'll work, I think. I just want to ask a question related to a recent post that Julie made on on Facebook about safe drug use in Calgary. I just wanted to find out a little bit more about if there's other services in place in Calgary or Edmonton or now in Manitoba about safe injections and just kind of through the evacuation process.
Sure. I think, Claudia, I don't think that you would speak to anything outside of the territory, correct? So I might throw this to Jennifer.
Yeah, I can speak only to the services that I'm aware that the other jurisdictions are able to provide, but not in a direct way.
Okay, Jennifer, do you have any information here?
In terms of the services that are provided through the evacuation centers, like it is based on the evacuation centers services that they provide. So some of it does vary across different evacuation centers, and within the government of Alberta, they do have an excellent website that we link to on the public safety page that identifies the types of supports that are provided to the evacuees that are there. And I know that there's in some evacuations centers, they have different queues, like different lineups for the types of supports that they're providing. and then you could register through those particular centers.
Thank you. Ethan, do you have a follow-up? Oh, sorry, Claudia, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I guess two things. One is, Northwest Territories itself does not actually have a safe injection site at present. So, our clients and community members wouldn't necessarily be expecting that particular type of care in alternate sites, in evacuation sites. But I've certainly been meeting directly with our partners from the health side of things in both Manitoba and Alberta. And in both jurisdictions, they assure us that they're well prepared to meet, complex health needs for evacuees as long as they identify themselves as needing those through evacuation centers. And any evacuee who has new or chronic health needs that whether or not they're registered, that they feel that needs addressing, both jurisdictions are well equipped and quite prepared to meet those needs directly, including those for people with substance misuse and addiction.
Thank you. Ethan, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of related. I'm not exactly sure who to direct this one to. I just want to ask, so is there any plan in place to make sure that, residents of the Northwest Territories who do struggle with drug addiction and substance misuse get back to the Northwest Territories, just to make sure that they're not left on the streets in some of these bigger cities?
Yeah, Claudia, can you speak to this one, please?
I actually don't think I'm in a strong position to talk about re-entry and tracking of particular individuals, but I see that that Premier's popped onto the screen, so perhaps she's ready for that one.
Premier?
Yes, thank you. We are actively working on identifying residents that were vulnerable, people that are homeless or under house from the Northwest Territories. The Executive Indigenous Affairs is working with Health and Social Services and the hosting N.W.T, changed the name, to try to identify those people, try to make sure they have the supports necessary, and reunite them to the Northwest Territories. In honesty, it's going to be a difficult process. We'll have to work with shelters. We'll have to work with probably shelters down south through the Privacy Commissioner as well, because people didn't identify. We didn't ask them when they registered, are you homeless? But we do have lists, so there's a process that we'll have to follow to make sure. But it is an issue that we're well aware of and that we're actively working on at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Okay, now I will take a question from Eric at Northern News Services. Hi, Eric.
Hello. So my question is for Ms. Welzenick. I'm just following up on your mention that, the costs of dealing with the fire so far are, as I think you said, astronomical. So I'm just wondering, considering the N.W.T didn't really have a lot of money to play with before all this happened, how out are we looking here as far as how much money is going to be needed to kind of fix this mess? I know you can't give me like an exact dollar figure, but something sort of a range might be worth. Well, thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Minister.
Yeah, thanks. I was gonna say that's the $1 million question. It's a little more than that. Look, stay tuned for Monday. We are going into an abridged session. So for those who weren't aware, this was meant to be the last legislative session for this assembly. We were all supposed to be sitting in session this week. We were supposed to be discussing the capital budget. Now that is being postponed. That's been postponed by the Speaker of the House. but we are going in on Monday for 1 day, and 2 things to be discussed is whether or not to delay the election, but secondly is to discuss an appropriation amount to support the wildfire amounts that are there. So, look, it's consensus government. I do know what numbers we are going to be seeking from the Legislative Assembly, but it's appropriate that happens on Monday in that forum. That doesn't necessarily answer entirely to your question, which I think is looking much bigger at the what's next. The costs are tremendous here. And that's just the wildfire actioning that we're undertaking. The costs of the evacuation here are equally, I'm sure, going to be astounding. Again, 65 or 68% of our residents are now outside of the territory, and we're still figuring out a fair and reasonable way to support people to come back. So, with anything else with our budget, we certainly don't do it alone. A lot of our budget does come through various programs under the federal government. I know they're watching, but beyond that, we are going to be having to look at what programs and services we are offering right now. Certainly we're all out of the territory. Are there projects that we need to look at that haven't started this particular construction season? There may be other opportunities for us to help keep our financial ship in order, so that we can make sure that folks, when they come back, are getting the supports they need before and after. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Eric?
I do. It's not on that subject, but some sort of on the subject. Since we have about 12,500 roughly people currently staying in evacuation centers, I'm going to cheat and make this a two-part question. First off, we've received a lot of questions about can people move around from center to center if they need to get closer to a healthcare center or something. The second question on that, piggybacking on that, is will people have to remain at evacuation centers if they want to be eligible to fly back when this is all over?
Sure. Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you. By all means, if you do need to move to a separate or a different evacuation center because of the types of supports that you need, if the supports aren't offered in the one you're currently staying in, one is offered in a different one, you by all means can move evacuation centers. We just ask that you deregister with the one that you're currently in and then re-register with the one that you plan to go into. In terms of supports coming back, we are actively working on a re-entry plan, and more details on that will follow.
Thanks very much. All right, Claudienne at Radio Canada.
Yes, thank you. So I will take advantage of Minister Wozniak's presence and ask her for your information to wrap up everything that was said about financial aid. So, Ministre Wozniak, si c'est possible, donc de me donner les grandes lignes. D'une part, on parle de l'aide financière qui sera demandée au fédéral. Vous parlez du programme de soutien au désastre. D'autre part, on parle beaucoup du soutien financier qui pourrait être redéfini pour ceux et celles qui ont quitté les territoires du Nord-Ouest par leurs propres moyens. Donc, il y a 2 aspects ici. Vous avez déjà répondu quand même, mais assez bien là, à propos de la session de lundi qui vient, du montant que vous connaissez. Qu'est-ce que vous allez demander à Ottawa? Comment vont ces conversations-là se passer?
Merci beaucoup. Je vais faire de mon mieux pour être bref, afin qu'on a beaucoup de choses parlées aujourd'hui. Certainement, l'aide financière d'Ottawa, on doit faire ces demandes encore. Je sais que que Madame Premier ministre, elle va faire ses demandes directement elle-même. Ça, c'est une relation qu'elle a avec la Première ministre. Mais hors de ça, notre gouvernement doit en premier s'assurer qu'on connaît c'est quoi les coûts qu'on a maintenant. Ça fait bon sens de savoir tous les frais qu'on a. On est encore dans le milieu de la désastre et peut-être même pas le milieu. C'est peut-être seulement le commencement. Alors, ce qu'on doit faire en commencement, c'est de savoir et comprendre vraiment c'est quoi les coûts qu'on en a. Ça se dépend en partie aussi à comment est-ce qu'on doit ou comment est-ce qu'on aura à redéfinir qu'est-ce qu'on va donner à des personnes. Les programmes qu'on en a maintenant, ce sont des programmes qui ont répondu à des désastres très différents que celui qu'on se trouve aujourd'hui. On n'avait pas ce grand nombre de personnes qui ont dû quitter leur maison, et non seulement ça, mais quitter le territoire au complet. Alors, comment on va répondre à ça en tant que les finances, en tant que les soutiens financiers? Ça, on doit encore découvrir, s'assurer. Et quand on a fait ça, là, on peut faire les demandes. Là, on peut aller déterminer si ça serait dans le soutien désastre de la gouvernement fédéral, ou peut-être qu'on doit avoir quelque chose d'autre qui va nous aider. Et puis, je pense pas que j'ai oublié quelque chose, mais surtout si j'ai oublié une question, tu peux me demander encore. Merci.
Merci. Juste pour vous relancer, vous êtes ministre des Finances, vous aurez à faire les comptes à la fin de l'année financière. Êtes-vous inquiète à ce moment-ci?
Je suis pas inquiète. Et je suis pas inquiète pour cette raison ici. On est un gouvernement public. Ça, c'est l'emploi d'un gouvernement public. On doit toujours être prêt à se répondre à des désastres, être prêt à répondre à une situation comme celle-ci. On n'en a peut-être pas les réponses aujourd'hui, mais on est obligé de les trouver. Quand j'ai commencé mon rôle ici, il y a maintenant presque 4 ans, notre situation financière n'était pas c'était pas bon. On avait un grand montant qui était un déficit et non un surplus. C'est quelque chose donc on est supposé d'avoir, un surplus toujours. Mais on se trouve dans une situation, quand j'ai donné mon budget maintenant, il y a quelques mois, un grand montant en surplus. Maintenant, je pense que cette situation est bien changée, mais on a réussi ça dans 4 ans et on peut le réussir encore. Merci.
Thanks, Minister. All right, so do we have any more N.W.T media on this call that I haven't covered yet? If there's anyone else on the line from N.W.T media, please raise your hand. No. Okay, so it's 8 o'clock, and I am going to get to Southern Media now, and I'm going to run this for another 15 minutes. So Carolyn Dunn, go ahead.
Thank you very much for taking my question. This is for Mike Westwick. I'm wondering if you can do just a brief update on the fire situation, both in Yellowknife and as well as the other areas, just because you didn't give a presentation tonight.
Go ahead, Mike.
Absolutely. I'll do a quick rundown. I'll start in Fort Smith. So Fort Smith, we've seen some really challenging conditions today. Highly active fire in the area, dark skies in the area. The fire does remain about 4 kilometers away from the community. It's kind of been active in different areas at this time. So we're in a similar situation there. The team's been preparing really hard to get good work done while they had a break in weather to prepare for days like this, and they continue to do that good work. There's more than 270 personnel, more than 50 pieces of heavy equipment, and dozens of helicopters on that one, and they've been doing some really good work throughout the day, working to keep that community safe and to support a safe return as soon as possible. Moving up to Hay River, again, throughout the South Slave region, we're seeing hot, dry temperatures there. At our last update here, that fire hadn't advanced further towards Hay River. We did see some kind of variable winds in the area that have been switching around a bit here and there. Again, teams doing great work there. Lots of heavy equipment on the ground. Military's there to help. They've been building out dozer guards, and the town of Hay River and Mayor Jameson's team, including Fire Chief Travis Wright there, have really been leading an incredible charge to set up community protections there, all working as a team once again. Unfortunately, sadly, for the second time this summer, to prepare to protect that community. Moving up to Yellowknife and the capital area, the Bechecal Yellowknife fire, the one that's kind of closest to Yellowknife, it's still about 15 kilometers to the northwest of Yellowknife. We saw northerly winds today. We saw a bit of drying today. We saw a couple spits of rain today, not enough to make any kind of difference. We did see lightning last night. That's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on, because when lightning strikes, you can have sleepers that then turn into new starts not too long after. We're ready to deal with that. You know, and the Ingram Trail fire again hasn't advanced too much. We've been going direct attack on that fire and have been having good success in holding that back from our established control lines in the area. You know, it hasn't reached Prelude North. I know that lots of evacuees and lots of folks on the trail are interested in that. So we're making good progress on that from the air and from the ground. You know, I would say on both of those fires, we got a lot of hot line that's there. Again, we've done some scanning, you know, after we got a bit of rain to kind of start to inform our strategy moving forward as we move to direct attack as the intensity of the head of those fires get to a point where we can do that safely. You know, I just have to reiterate that even though the advance of these fires has paused for now, there still remains an active threat in the area, and we're doing absolutely everything we can on the ground to keep the community safe there. And of course, with Chief Sangris on the phone or on the line here rather, that N.W.T fire ZF085 also has not advanced closer to N.W.T. It's still about 29 kilometers to the southeast of that community and hasn't made much growth over the past little while. Yesterday, or sorry, a couple of nights ago, they got actually 10 millimeters of rain in the area of that fire. And you know, that's given some assistance. We do have a plan. If that fire becomes an issue again and begins traveling towards N.W.T or the Ingram Trail. We do have planned ignitions that we're considering to head off that northward and westward growth on that fire. So again, we're just managing this huge collection of fire that's encircling our capital area and these Yellowknife's Dene First Nation communities, and working hard every single day to mitigate those risks and get folks home safe and home as soon as possible.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right.
That's my question.
Perfect. All right, Carrie Tate, your hand is up.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I'm curious why the evacuation flights started going to Winnipeg. On Friday, we were told they were directed there because the Calgary evacuation centers were at capacity. Calgary has said that its evacuation center has 2,500 people, which means it's only at half its capacity. Sending flights to Winnipeg means you're spreading people out further across Western Canada. Communities, families are separated. I'm just wondering why that decision happened and why N.W.T believed that Calgary was at capacity.
Jennifer, can you speak to this one, please?
Yeah, our information from the Calgary Evacuation Center was that it had reached capacity and it had asked us to redirect other incoming evacuees to our next host location. If the data that is being reviewed is off the website, Alberta has informed me that sometimes their tracker on the website in terms of capacity is a little bit delayed. So I don't know if that might be causing some of the confusion potentially.
I'm still a little curious there. I mean, that could have been cleared up with a phone call, but even beyond that, even yesterday, Calgary put out a press release saying it was only at half. Today, again, they were reiterating that they're only at half. Is there a plan perhaps to redirect flights to Calgary or something just to keep things perhaps all in one place?
Jennifer?
I'm not aware of this information that Calgary is putting. I'll have to look into it and then obviously talk with the planning team internally to see what options are ahead for us.
Thank you. Okay, no one else has their hand up. Northern Media, if you have any additional questions, feel free to raise your hand. Colette, go ahead. Okay, Eric?
Hey, this kind of falls into, I mean, I'm sure the answer is going to be stay tuned, but will there be supports for small businesses that have had to shut down operations as a result of this evacuation?
Minister Wozniak, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So it is a little bit of a stay tuned response, but you know, I think we can be a little more fulsome than that. I can tell you that today, Department of Industry, Tourism and Investment has already met with the Yellowknife Chamber of Commerce. I believe they're scheduled to meet with the Fort Smith Chamber of Commerce tomorrow. You know, and this is, no one likes to use the word COVID anymore, but we've been through this once before where we've had to be in touch with businesses, the business community, to figure out and to identify firstly what the needs are. We are regularly in contact with N.W.T Tourism as well, and have also been in contact with some of the mines from the mineral resource industry, just to determine, from not so much that they would require anything from us, but in that sense, it's often more of determining what capacity they might have to support their impact and benefit agreement partners. So a lot of that work is underway. I know the BDIC board, I believe, is meeting this week as well to discuss the situation. So when it's stay tuned, it's not stay tuned in the vacuum. It's because there's some very active conversations happening right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Sydney Cohen.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if the minister can kind of, Minister Wozniak can be like a little bit more clear on supports. I know it's you're still working on evacuation supports for people, but is it going to be a situation where sort of the government is going to try to figure out who has the means to come back on their own, and then not like, are you going to means test this in some way? And can you provide any more clarity for people with regard to that?
Go ahead, Minister.
For returning home, yeah, and their accommodations now.
Yeah, thanks. You know, yeah, I know this is a question I think a lot of us have been fielding today over the course of the day. Look, the process by which a new funding program using public dollars gets approved is it first comes through as in the form of an options to the Financial Management Board, and that putting together those options and what that might look like, that is the work that's happening right now in the Department of Finance, and then it would come through to the Financial Management Board for approval. But we're at that first stage, and that's where when I'm hesitant to say, okay, well, it's going to look like this, that, or the other, because the policy work's being done right now to determine what will work, what will be appropriate, what will be responsive. So, you know, that's where the example, and I think Minister Thompson gave it earlier, of when Hay River was being evacuated and they were entering, I think it was their second week of evacuation, this is back in the spring, first evacuation. That second week, it started to realize that, you know, people whose income streams had been interrupted, were counting on a paycheck, now weren't getting a paycheck. You know, that was a need that had come up that was different from previous evacuations. The length and the duration of this one created this very different need. Now we have this program that's in place. We have some parameters. We can still operate as a public government that utilizes public dollars. If we're going to start up a new program now using public dollars, again, you know, would it be means tested? That may be one option. Would it be linked to distance travel? That may be an option. Will it be linked to, you know, what would the cost of the flight be? What would the offset there be? These are all options, and I don't want to limit the work that's happening, you know, 5 days in, and 5 days in after an evacuation where all of our senior staff have been evacuated. Don't want to limit creativity. I also don't want to limit the need to be responsive to what has gone on, where we have such a population that's been on the move. So I know it's a long answer, but because I think it does, you know, the message needs to be clear that, you know, we realize people have had to drive their vehicles a long way. We realize they're going to have to drive them back. We realize, you know, that the length here may be significant, that the interruption to businesses may be significant. But yeah, determining how that's going to look in a way that is as fair as possible, as responsive as possible. And again, you know, keeping in mind we're dealing with public dollars, that's what we're really actively looking at right now. Thanks.
Thanks, Minister. Nellie at Lucky Long.
Yes, I have a question for Mike Westwick. In an update yesterday, it was said more time is needed to assess the situation in Yellowknife, in the Bechuco and Yellowknife fire. So I would like to know how much time is still needed to evaluate the situation and the amount of work needed to eliminate any fire threat in the capital.
It's a fair question. I mean, I think that, you know, folks are looking for that answer. You know, it could take a few days here to assess that 40 kilometers plus of hot perimeter line on the eastern side of that we're focusing our direct attack work on. I know it's tough. It's tough to not have an exact answer on that front, but it's really important that we get the strategy right, that we hit the right places, and that we are setting a safe trigger in terms of how much progress we will need to make in order to safely say that that these 20,000 plus folks from this area can come home safely and not have to have it hanging over their head that they might have to leave right again as a fire continues to move forward. It's a very challenging community to have folks leave, as everyone knows, as everyone who's got on this call, who's got friends, family, partners, whomever, who are part of that exodus, who aren't up here as essential workers. You know, it was a huge undertaking, and what was undertaken by the emergency management organization was quite staggering to get folks out of here safe. So we need to make sure, from a fire threat perspective, that we're very confident that that this place is going to be safe when folks return. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Emily Blake, you had your hand up at some point and it went down. Do you have a question? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much to our panel and to media for asking your questions. And media, if you do have further questions, please reach out to the appropriate department or the Office of the Press Secretary for ministerial or premier media requests. So that's presssecretary@gov.nt.ca. And we will do this again tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'm hoping that the technical difficulties that we were experiencing with our media distribution list have been fixed. So hopefully you're getting that media advisory. But again, if you do not receive it by 2 o'clock, please send Press Secretary an email and I'll make sure to send you that link. Thanks very much. Take care.